At this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Ross for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board and our community. It is an honor as we get ready for the holiday season to recognize our students and all of the amazing work that they're doing this year. Would like to talk about some exciting opportunities we have for School District 5. As you heard, we had our first ever Division I state champion in golf. And now we have the first opportunity to have Division I and Division II football champions. As you know, the 5A division has been separated into two different 5A region or classification has been separated into two divisions. And so for the first time, Irmo and Dutch Fork High Schools are playing for state football championships. Irmo will play this Saturday, December 14th, versus Northwestern. That'll be at 6 o'clock. These games will be held at South Carolina State University, and Dutch Fork will play Summerville at 2 p.m. And that's right, that's Friday during the school day. So there's been a lot of discussion about, Ross, what do we do with that school day? I wanted to just make it very public and very clear, the options that we have. I know e-learning comes to everybody's mind. We can just do an e-learning day, but I would ask that we pay attention to the e-learning days district handbook issued by the State Department of Education. E-learning is for weather-related absences, and you won't hold those on the date of the actual event. So that leaves us with three options. We can either run school as normal, close school, or run a half day. Please be reminded of the state law regarding attendance. We have, and again, I'll be honest with you, e-learning came to mind as well, but I was quickly reminded of our responsibility to the e-learning district handbook. And so by law, we are supposed to have 180 days of instruction. So if you cancel school for a football game or any other event, you must do a makeup day. If you use a half day for any event, you must swap it with one of your half days. You get 3 half days. And so we chose to utilize the half day of instruction. Would this be May, I think, in May. This will give an opportunity for a lot of our faculty and staff who are involved in the programming to be available to participate and go watch. So we put that information out today about noon, but I wanted to make everybody aware of the limitations that are surrounded with e-learning and why we chose to do the half day. So with that, we're trying to make every decision as a system, answering 3 critical questions. Why do we do this work? How do we accomplish that why, and then what are our outcomes? Our vision is that we love and grow our students. Our mission is that we're focused on academic, social, emotional growth and development, and then our outcomes are driven by our strategic plan with those objectives that every student feels loved in our schools and every student has demonstrated academic growth in our schools. The state of South Carolina Department of Education has a strategic plan that says that by 2030, at least 75% of our students will be at or above grade level. And so we have targeted this year as the growing season. And within the growing season, we are using our data to help us drive the decision making. For instance, with our focus on graduation rate, we track this weekly, celebrating last week a dramatic uptick in the amount of students who are moving towards graduation. So I want to celebrate that, celebrate those gains with our high schools and our high school staff as we identify not just the numbers, but the names behind those numbers and the stories behind those names. As we look at our march towards 75% proficiency, that we know while we've made a lot of progress over the years, we still have progress to go. And so we're focusing in on all of our measures. We don't want to ever leave a measure out, but specifically highlighting the need for improvement and growth in English language arts. Currently, we're serving over 61 different languages in School District 5. And we want to make sure that each, as we talk about diversity, each of these languages are served and that we are meeting their needs in terms of academic readiness. One of the things that I wanted to remind the board of is Act 114 that was passed this year. A number of policies that we will take up tonight are affected by this law. Act 114 is the Read to Succeed amendments. If we look at our third grade SE Ready results, be reminded that those students scoring does not meet in this year are required to be retained unless good cause exemption is met. The reading portfolio has been removed from good cause exemption. So if this was in place last year, there would be 16,238 third graders back in the additional third graders retained. What does that look like for School District 5? Well, if this was in place last year, there would be an extra 266 third graders that we would have had to retain. Well, it is in place now, and this is our big focus. I want to thank academics and student services, everyone who's pulled around of supporting our students so that we can meet the needs that they have. But this is a big issue for us this year. It's a huge focus, and we're going to continue to talk about this throughout the school year. This is the driver behind our administrative priorities, whether classroom supports, teacher retention and recruitment, and ensuring a safe and productive learning environment for all of our students. So as we look forward to supporting our teachers, as we meet these needs, these challenges that we have, their students, our future is different from our past, and so we are looking at ways to be innovative, creative to meet those needs. One of the innovations that we have come into the district is through our referendum. So as we move forward, moving to meet the needs of our students' futures, it brings us to the next steps of how do we finance the referendum, how do we manage the projects and the rezoning. Tonight you will see as we bring forth to discussion, we have Ms. Franny Hauser here, our bond attorney, as we talk about the financing of the bonds in the first bond resolution. You will see in Exhibit R of the packet our solicitation for our construction management group. We thought it was important, instead of, as these construction management firms typically work off of percentages, 2% or 1% of $240 million will start to eat into the budget. And so what we would like to do is isolate those projects of most critical need as we issue these out as solicitation. What are the projects we absolutely need to have construction management on, and those rehab projects that we can manage within-house, we will do those within-house. So the first project that you will see in our solicitation is all of those projects that are around the rezoning related items. That's the building of the new Dutch Fork Elementary School, the wings at Chapin Elementary School and Lake Murray Elementary School, as well as the movement of 3 programs into the Rich Lakes Education Center, the 5 program, the Adult Ed program, and the Academy for Success. We want to make sure that we're using the public's trust in the best way forward, and managing these construction management projects into chunks would be into the areas that we need them the most would be the best utilization of that. We talk about a Citizens Advisory Review Team, an extra layer and partnership of just transparency as we move through this project. And what are we talking with the Citizens Advisory Review Team about? It's really going through our bond referendum dashboard. Before you can get to construction, there's procurement, design, construction documents and bidding, permitting, construction, occupancy, and closeout. And so we will look forward to our dashboard in the new year as we move with our Citizens Advisory Review Team, expanding our existing advisory to talk more about the items that we have within the referendum. And then last, rezoning. So as we move through these projects, again, we are looking at ways to protect the budget, to move through so that we can deliver everything that we have within our project list. Rezoning is our goal to address the capacity issues that we see in the Chapin area. And so we also will do this by the restructuring of the district. We will move from this current structure, which will be in place for one more school year, which is next year. This will allow us to make sure that programs, people, and equipment, certifications, all of this is in place as we move from this structure to this structure. The structure now moves to a 5 middle school system. You can see the feeders into the different schools so that we can better maximize the academic and programmatic needs of our students. So we will enact this July 1 of 2026. But it takes, and we've learned from other districts, that it takes that time of planning to make sure that you have the right staff, the right programs, the right people, equipment, and everything in place when we make this move. This corresponds to a change in the elementary zones, as well as the shifts that we will have there. So we are messaging that out, and I want to thank our planning team and our operations team for the hundreds of thousands of parcels that they went through in order to make this happen, along with rerunning all of our bus routes, over 200-something bus routes to get these zones in place. So in the timeline, as we look out to be in place by August 26, we will notify, we will start to involve our faculty and staff in the process on May of 2025. You will start hearing in January how that process works, but we will wanted to just kind of lay out why that red dot is over May 2025. And we use the summer of 25 and the summer of 26 to make sure that we have the certifications in place necessary to operate fall of 2026. At this time, January also brings forth a update in our cell phone policy. We have already made the passage of that cell phone policy, but I bring forth our Chief of Student Services and Planning, Dr. Mike Harris, to talk about the update in the cell phone actions. Dr. Harris.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ross, Madam Chair, members of the board, again, Superintendent Ross, our community. We, earlier in the top of the summer, 2024, State Department came forward with a proviso 1.103, anti-bullying and school safety, that basically indicated to districts across South Carolina that we were to enact a policy that would prohibit access to personal electronic communication devices for students during the instructional day. We jumped on that pretty early. We began that October 28th of this year. This board, District 5 board, in fact, approved the policy that we currently have, policy JICJ, prohibition of personal electronic devices during the school day. Now, with that, was in preparation as per that proviso for a law that is to be come forward at the top of the year, January 1 of 2025. This policy basically talks about personal electronic devices as well as accessories, and it indicates that the time frame is from bell to what we consider or refer to as bell to bell, essentially from the morning charter bell until the afternoon dismissal, which concludes the instructional day. Now, this policy does not include any prohibitions on school buses, field trips, or during athletic events, or athletic events. Now, students are, quite frankly, are to stow away and silence their devices and or accessories during the instructional day. This talks about during the classroom as well as in the exchange of classes or change of classes, if you will, and during the lunch periods. Now, with most policies, there are some exemptions or some exclusions, if you will, and this policy does include the fact that if a student does have an IEP or medical plan or 504 plan, that is already written into those plans, that they certainly have means and access to those devices as appropriate. And finally, of course, in the event that there were students or are students that are pretty adamant about not adhering to the policy and the current rule that's in place, then they will be subject to the discipline that's found in the Student Code of Conduct. I want to say at this point right now, our schools have done an outstanding job of making certain that they begin to roll this out and apply this in our schools. I feel very, very comfortable, and we had lots of conversations and continue to have conversations, quite frankly, and prior to the top of the year, January, when the law was enacted. So I did want to give a major shout out to our schools, K through 12, for doing a super job of making certain that students, parents, and all are duly aware of what this policy says. Tonight is really about an opportunity of reminding or sharing with you in this last board meeting prior to the turn of the year that this is moving forward or has moved forward. The horse is out of the gate, if you will. We are implementing this as we speak, and we're in good shape at this point right now to meet the January 1 law that's coming forward in 2025. So just want to share that with you all to remind our community that this is moving forward. And one indicator that it is working reasonably well is that when we meet with our student advisory, I would oftentimes ask them, how's it going with the no use of cell phones? And I get this oftentimes, and then I kind of get grunts. So that is an indication that things are moving well, and they're at least in the right direction. So I did want to mention that to them, and shout out to our student advisory for that reason. But that basically concludes what I wanted to say to you on tonight, and again, just my way of reminder of the policy that has already been approved and moving forward, the prohibition of personal electronic devices.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Do we have any questions? Mr. Bainum?
Yes, sir. There was word that there were going to be potential grants, provided. Did we apply for any of those, and have they been awarded?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Last year, and just by way of history, last year the district received a grant from the Safe Schools Grant of about $130,000 or so for school safety. And what we used that money for was kind of seed money. That's kind of where we started at some of the first use of redoing some of the vestibules that are in some of the schools. That's kind of where some of that started. Unbeknownst to us, we did not know whether or not that was going to continue or not, but in fact it did. And we received another allocation this year after application, and about twice as much. So with that, we have already begun talking with our schools on a number of instances, going to talk about pouches, cell phone pouches, as well as storage devices that we were highly encouraged by the state to write into the grant, and we follow suit. And I think that had a lot to do with the amount of funds that we did receive under that Safe School. So yes, long way to answer your question, yes, there are funds available, and yes, we do have or nearing opportunity to order pouches as well as cell phone storage units for our secondary schools.
And the other question was, I've had parents ask, are principals able to set a more restrictive policy than the district, such as pouches or storage boxes?
Again, our secondary schools will be receiving those, and they are actually working with us right now in terms of just how many. We want to kind of do a hybrid of that. Some of them will have more pouches than storage units and vice versa, but both are available to our schools, and they're actively involved with that, absolutely.
Thank you. Do we have Mr. Satterfield?
Yeah, I just wanted to share with you, at the school board convention meeting this weekend, there was a presentation by Rock Hill Schools, which they implemented it at the beginning of the year. I'm sure you're well aware of that. They said, 2 weeks of a few bumps and bruises, and then everything went very well. So you have to endure that, especially since this has become such a habit for many of our students. And one of the things that we noted that I thought was a pretty neat idea, and I'm all about stealing ideas from other folks. They put little small decorative signs that students could see and parents could see. They weren't big warnings, but they were just reminders, a sort of gentle reminder that, you know, this is a no cell phone zone, or, you know, schools, however you want to word it. But I thought that was a pretty neat idea. And, but they said that they are exceedingly happy. Teachers are happy. Kids seem to be more engaged. And, but I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Dr. Harris.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. And last, I want to talk about the annual budget timeline. And I think it's, as Dr. Harris kind of constantly reminded us of the change in the cell phone policy, I want to constantly remind about the ESSER cliff that exists. For the last 3 years, we have really benefited from over $23.3 million of funds that have come through 3 series of the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funding. That, on average, is about $7.7 million per year. But the current amount of ESSER funds that we have are now zero. So that means that moving forward, a lot of those things and services that we enjoyed that were within those different series of ESSER now fall back onto the general fund. A reminder of what goes in our general fund budget. Of that budget, 64% of it comes from the state of South Carolina, the State Department. The 35% comes from our local taxes, and we have about 1% in grant. Now, how do we use that? About 88 cents of every dollar goes to salaries and benefits, about 7 cents for utilities and purchase services. Supplies and materials is 4 cents from every dollar, and equipment is 1 cent from every dollar. So as we prepare for the annual budget, I want us to focus on board policy DB, and our goal is to finance the educational programs and priorities for the system. As an educator, that is my focus, is what are our educational programs and priorities. And I think we, as a board and as a district, need to establish those. The administration showed our priorities. Our priorities are an environment for learning. You hear the students talk about it matters, having an environment where they can do amazing work, to have teacher retention and recruitment, and also to have classroom supports. We'd like to know what the board's priorities are. So planning this process goes all the way down to the citizens in our school district. But also within that policy, I want to make the board aware that during the month of February of each year, the principals and department heads, they put their request in. So what we don't want to do is get to May, where that first budget is due to the board, and they don't know what the will of the board is or what the priorities of the board are. So if we are making a request for A, B, C, but the board wants to fund X, Y, Z, we have disconnect. So again, because our board policy says that our budget looks at our educational programs and priorities, we would like to hear a little bit about what the board's policy and what the board's priorities are. I want to show just, and I'm not going to read all of this, but what goes into the budget. We have different tasks and a lot of sequencing of those tasks. And we take all of those tasks and those sequences and we put it on this calendar. And this calendar is just for the budget. And each person has a role within it. But I want you to focus on the top part. The executive staff, the principals, directors, our PTSO groups and advisor groups, they all have a role in it. But if we just look at the first 2 levels, the board of trustees and the superintendent, you can see that you get your accountability report in October, which really starts to give you what some of our instructional needs are throughout the district. In December, you have our audit, which we'll have today, and move on the calendar. But we're asking in January, because so many of our tasks happen after January as a district, that the board conduct a workshop to talk about those priorities. And if we have those in January, then the department heads and the principals can align their requests by board policy to the priorities established by the board. So that is goes into baked into our request. It would also help us as we look at any budget amendments that would come in January. We would be aligned with those earlier. So we're asking that of this body. Last of the superintendent's report on your table is our hiring event. The hiring season used to be in February and March, and it's not officially concluded like National Signing Day until May the 10th, I believe. May the 10th is signing day in the state, but we begin January 11th, and with the teacher shortage, and we're moving earlier and earlier in this phase. So mark your calendars. If you know anyone interested, voted the #1 best place to teach in the state of South Carolina. So excellent branding, and we're excited about this work and as we look forward to the hiring season. So with that, Madam Chair, members of the board, that concludes the superintendent's report, and I stand for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. Do we have any questions? Ms. Huddle?
Dr. Ross, very early on, you showed the jump in the projected graduation rate, and I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that and why it jumped so much in 1 month. Or I guess it was a month or a quarter.
I know we got a report from the Shimmers today, if you can talk about that.
I can tell you that we are focusing mainly on finding the students that you know has transitioned from one place to another, and being able to identify where they are, and that's been one piece of that that's helped to increase. Plus, continuing to follow along where the students are in terms of their coursework. But the big thing right now is really being able to locate those students who are that were in our graduation rate group that were no longer in our schools, but we're accountable for finding out where they are. And so being able to find some of those students.
And a huge shout out, I can tell you, to Dutch Fork High School. They were
Yes.
a big part of that jump in one time. So those graduation teams are now, as we're moving through the year, are moving, like Ms. McCaskill said, finding those students. And we look forward to some bigger jumps in the future.
Mr. Maynham?
And this might be a question for you. Do we know on the third graders that were below the 266, do we know how many of those were in the reading intervention? Do we have data on that?
Of the 266 students that would have been in that does not meet, I don't have the exact number for the does not meet. Last year was divided into a does not meet 1 and a does not meet 2 category. All of the does not meet 1 category students were in intervention, but I don't have the data on the does not meet 2 because those were not students we were specifically responsible for the intervention piece of until this year with the law. But I can tell you this year we're looking at MAP scores anything below a 186, and we're intervening with that currently. So I don't have exact numbers for that.
Thank you. And then one more on the construction management firm. Do we know, will the same firm be responsible for each group of the 80 million? Their pay, is it based off of each 80 million dispersion, or is it the full 240?
So very good. What we did not want to do is make it off a percentage of the 240. If we look at kind of, and I'm looking at Ms. Tucker if I'm in error here, but we look at our current management project is at Irmo High School. Rough numbers about, Dave, about $800,000 over a $37 million project. So just rough numbers, that's about 2-something%. 2% of 240 brings you about $5 million. That starts to eat into the project really quick. So what we try to do is look at the projects that we really need that help on, and those projects that we can kind of manage in-house, more like the maintenance projects. We wouldn't double that fee, and we can get some scale there. So we'll know our final numbers once the projects are finally bid. If there are some construction management companies that don't charge percentages but have flat rates, that may, help out in the selection process as well. But just knowing the industry, we do need that. We see the huge benefit of having construction management, but we don't want to just at scale say you're getting a percentage of 240 when we can do some things in-house.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Dr. Ross.